All right, so I hope all of you can see the slide. So I will start off with all right, just let me stop sharing for a second and I will share again. Okay, so if I may take a little bit of your time, as we talk about it, take a look at this particular QR code. So, while every time we talk about a keynote, there seems to be that, well, there is one speaker and a lot of people who are listening in. So just to kind of change things around a little bit, I would let you work first before I actually start talking about, is that a problem? That's sort of what my main aim is, to understand that is there a challenge that young people are facing today, and are there something we can do about it? So you can take your time to go through this particular set of questions, but I will let you start it, but also maybe take some time to kind of listen in, and then you can go back and complete that questionnaire, and you will see something quite interesting that comes out of it. So this is just to give you a quick sense of it. It's to tell you about what exactly is the survey that we are going to talk about today in this particular keynote. It's a survey called a FInWR survey. It is no war, but maybe it's a war against financial exclusion, if I may say so. So it is Financial Inclusion, Wellness, and Resilience survey that was actually run in from March to April this year, together with an event, the first virtual My Money at Campus event that Minister of State Ghan has actually mentioned to you in the beginning in her speech as well. So while you take your time, I will just mention a few things, that why is this actually important and what exactly do we get out of it. This is the range of values. So we had about 1,068 participants. I'll mention about the details in a short while. About half of them were tertiary sector students in Singapore who participated in the My Money at Campus and volunteered to be part of this particular survey, which is a benchmarking survey we are going to talk about. And then this is the distribution. Now, if some of you have to go back to your high school days or in your early college days and think about it, this looks very much like this bell curve that sometimes we dread if it's a great distribution. Sometimes we love it if that makes your grades actually go higher. So it can connect you with something that you have seen before, but more importantly, what you could see is the score that you get. I will flash it at the end as well, and you will see that this particular score tells you about where you are in the scoring system of this FInWR, which gives you some guidance. A guidance to you about how well you're doing compared to your peers in financial wellness and resilience. Obviously, many of these things can be improved. So that is basically the focus of the keynotes today, about what these scores are, what we have found out with this particular survey over the student population in Singapore, the tertiary student population, as well as young adults between the ages of 25 and 30. The student population is between 18 and 24, and young adults who are working young adults between the ages of 25 and 30, to see what their scores have been. These scores are based on a series of questions that were asked, and those questions are somewhat nuanced questions about what decisions sometimes you would make or what judgments you would make based on those scenarios and questions. We'll talk a little bit about some of the questions, but other questions also which are there. The short survey that I posted in the QR code before. If you haven't had a chance, this is the QR code. I would love to have get you to do this, and the data that you are going to get from there, the score you will get, is completely yours, meaning that you can actually look at the data, look at the score, and then you can judge for yourself where you are in this particular grand scheme of thing. So this is the basis of the whole idea of democratization of financial knowledge. So we will be going ahead and actually empowering students and young adults to understand where they stand in terms of their financial resilience going forward. So just to give you a quick sense of this before we move on, let's talk a little bit about financial wellness. Now, before we look at, there is wellness, of course, is an industry. Financial wellness is probably a relatively new term that you might not have actually seen as yet. So high level of wellness, this is going back all the way to studies that was done by Dunn in 1959 about how to interpret wellness itself. So high level of wellness for an individual is defined as an integrated method of functioning in which is oriented towards maximizing the potential of what individual is capable of within the environment of or he or she is functioning. So wellness has 5 or 8 different components that later Stowen in 2017 talked about. So physical wellness that we are aware of, social wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness, vocational wellness, environmental wellness, spiritual wellness, and finally financial wellness. So you can see that in the 2-day symposium, we are trying to actually approach a lot of them, including environmental wellness as well as maybe financial wellness as well, together with it. So you will have a sense of how holistically we are trying to look at this whole idea of how well you are doing in some sense. So just to have a quick definition, which is taken from University of Maryland's Your Guide to Living Well, which is a very well adopted thing. So I love the definition. Financial wellness includes our relationship with money, skills to manage resources to live within our means, making informed financial decisions and investments, setting realistic goals, learning to prepare for short and long-term needs or emergencies. Part of this dimension also include an awareness that everyone's financial values, needs, and circumstances are unique. So they're indeed a cultural, a specificity, a uniqueness to all our being. So we need to find out our path towards the goal that we want to reach. So this is sort of a kind of an overarching definition of wellness. That's sort of our starting block. So to try to just get some of these things in that particular process to look at, our main objective for designing this survey based on current literature that is out there, very current literature on a couple of papers which are published in 2020. And we want to see how to understand and establish a baseline or benchmark, whichever way you want to call it, financial wellness, including financial literacy, which is one of the hallmarks of financial wellness as well, together with a component-wise, so different elements and integrated approach among young adults in Singapore. So this is really somewhat similar to a study that was done and published by Lusardi, Hassler, and Jakubowski in 2020, as well as Clapper and Lusardi in 2020, based on some of their studies earlier on under the S&P Global Financial Literacy Survey that was done back in 2014, 2015, under the auspices of the World Bank as well. So we are going to try to match some of these and see whether we can score and give some numbers to exactly the question of how well are we doing financially. So in some sense, the sample, as I mentioned, was 1068 to 1068 individuals who responded. 563 of them were between 18 to 24 years old in the tertiary sectors as students, and 505 were young working adults between the ages of 25 and 30. They represented a population age distribution of Singapore that we actually carefully kind of categorized as much as we could. And we want to produce, really the aim is to produce a comprehensive quantitative measure of participants' financial wellness and resilience score so that we can benchmark future improvements that is happening with all the different tools, including the programs that are going on. One of them is humbly the program that Citi Foundation and SMU has been doing for the last 12 years or 10 years for now, going into the 10th year in terms of funding. So indeed, we'll take a look at these as well as we go along. So just to give you a quick sense, because of obviously our time is quite limited, just to give you a quick sense of exactly how these things are distributed, you have questions which are in different categories. So these questions include comprehending risk, which is understanding risk, insurance or insuring, investing, go to information sources, how do you collect or get information, consumption, earning, saving, borrowing, digital literacy, fintech, budgeting, and sustainability. So the first 8 of them were from based on this study that was done by Professor Lusardi et al. And then we wanted to go ahead and expand it further. Obviously, the questions were not the same. We did not have access to those questions. So we created the questions which are culturally sensitive to what is going on in Singapore as well, to understand it a little better. So these are the key findings that I wanted to share. And hopefully you might be able to see what are the areas you might focus on as well going forward. So one of the things that we have mentioned on this particular case is the following. So we look at let's look at the bottom up. Savings, I think many of us, because of the cultural context, many of us are in a good position to understand. So 75% was the average score on the savings front. This is average based on those types of questions that were asked, but earning actually was the one that was in the bottom. So while we are more aware of saving, but we might not be always aware of earning. And this is something that we will explore later as well. The last five, which might be problem areas, includes investing, fintech, how we can deploy it better, insurance, as well as comprehending risk, which turns out to be one of the biggest challenges that are out there that we wanted to highlight as well. So the overall percentage was about 63.7% of all these 12 categories together, but the ones lower are the ones that we might actually be worried about a little bit more to see how we can improve. All right, so this is sort of the questions on, if I may, on questions on financial health. Are we doing well? Are we doing well financially? So we find out some important elements of it, which I wanted to highlight. So if you look at the question, the questions were asked that, are you managing debt well, for example? Many of them are agreeing, but we find that about 33% are not confident that they are managing their debt well. Okay. Similarly, able to make ends meet, about 18%, a little over 18% actually are finding it a little difficult. When you look at finding out funds for emergency purchases that might be needed, actually 98% is saying that they are fairly confident they will be able to get the relevant resources to actually fund those purchases. Emergency funds, on the other hand, when you are looking for money or cash, that is a little less confident. So about 22% are not confident that they will be able to access the amount of money that might be needed in an emergency, which is a small fraction of maybe about a month or 2 months salary in some sense. And then you are looking at how many are planning for retirement. We find that a majority, almost 96.9% of them basically were quite confident. Partly this might have to do with the fact that CPF is there, and they are people mostly are quite aware of it. So this is something that we wanted to kind of highlight as well. But let's take a look at the question, that is it that our the goals are whether they are aligned or not. That means that, are we measuring something different than what we want? So if these questions that we just posed are related to the financial wellness score that I suggested to you in the very beginning, are they related or are they very different? So we looked at 5 quintiles, so 20% in the bottom, all the way next 20% and so on, all the way to the 20% of the top. In terms of the financial wellness score or the FInWR score, we find out that most of these questions are somewhat aligned to it. So it's gradually growing up based on the score. So obviously that also means that these are to some extent measuring wellness. As I mentioned, the only exception to some extent to this particular rule is the planning for retirement, which seems pretty well in the bottom quintile as well. And that probably because of the very widespread awareness of what CPF actually can produce. Just to give you a quick sense of the question, we also posed a question on a possible financial, hard to detect financial scam. So these are the options. So one of those questions are asked in your brief survey as well. I will keep the question here, but I'll just explain in a couple of minutes what exactly this question is trying to check. These are all prospective financial plans that you have or offered to you. You want to identify which is most likely not a scam, not a scam, meaning that it is feasible to do it. And we have 2 of them, B and D, are both feasible to do. One is this whole idea of a rule of 72. So how long does it take to double your money? It's basically you take the interest rate and divide 72 by that interest rate, and that's the period. So if you divide 72 by 4%, which is the rate of interest you're going to get in the special account in CPF, that indeed is 18 years to double your money. So indeed B and D, which is the 3% real return, which is real rate of return, which is once again 4% minus the inflation rate, which is approximately 1%. So both of them are feasible. The first one, guaranteed return, giving 10% over a long period of time, that is not completely feasible because of the market fluctuations, has to be taken into account. So that's sort of the types of questions we often ask. But if you want to look at how did each of these scores do when this question was asked, and we looked at the scoring of this question in the points that you see and the wellness scores that are there, it turns out that the FinLit score, which is based on the S&P Global Financial Literacy Survey that was done published in 2015, that one was only about 0.18 was the correlation, while 0.26, which is slightly higher than that, was the correlation with a higher FINWR score. The FinLit score and the FINWR score, which are one is for wellness, the other one is for financial literacy, have about 63% correlation. So they are related, but they are not exactly the same. That's sort of something I wanted to mention. Just a few quick points I don't want to go into detail since I have probably about a minute or so to wrap up. As I'm getting about a minute, about 3-4 minutes to wrap up. I just wanted to mention that there is variation across the subjects that might have been taken. These are associative, not predictive, meaning that which subject you take and your financial wellness scores in terms of percentile rank, how far up you are in the percentage and where you are in the bottom. So 0%, 10%, all the way up to 100%. You will see that there is some differences. It seems like the students with some background in business might be doing slightly better, even though they are kind of spread out throughout the all the ranges of values, but some might not be as well represented on top. So there might be something to do with maybe some business or oriented classes might be needed, or particularly finance related classes might be needed in some cases, which to improve the financial wellness score, if I may. These are, of course, associative, as I mentioned, so this is not predictive. So you would not be able to simply have more business classes and automatically change the score itself. Just to give you some quick sense, the business, non-business majors I mentioned, it also seems like that similar thing happens between STEM and non-STEM measures to some extent, meaning that ones who are business majors seems to do get a sort of higher than average score in general, both in the FINWR score as well as the FinLit score. It's marginal, but for STEM students, it turns out that the difference is sort of marginal in some cases, but non-STEM students, STEM is of course science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, includes the topics which in those areas, and business, only economics is included there, but other business courses are not. So that also seems there is some differences in this particular descriptive study that we are talking about. We need to look at it a little bit more carefully to see, are these predictive as well, meaning that there is some elements to the syllabus that has been covered, which might also explain some of the reasons of this difference. I will probably go into the second story, which is also kind of I think something of a conventional wisdom, that if you start working, you will already understand how financial literacy work, your scores will be higher. We don't see that evidence as much. In fact, young adults who are working young adults are not doing as well compared to some students, like some university students in this particular group. In fact, most of the categories, you see, except for fintech, in fact, all of them, it seems like that the proportion of students or non-working students who are doing better than working young adults seems to be higher. So that's something that we have to worry about. Maybe some more help is needed along this particular line. So just to kind of wrap up this particular quick session, so financial inclusion catalyzes financial wellness and resilience, and formation of good habits at an early age, which is sort of what we are trying to encourage, helps to crystallize personal and financial goals, particularly develop the wellness that we have talked about in a very holistic way. So in sum, what we are trying to produce a comprehensive quantitative measure of participants' wellness, financial wellness and resilience score, and then we will try to benchmark it as we go along and see whether we can find out or identify some particular factors which is possibly can be changed to as an intervention to try to improve the wellness score along the way. But last but not the least, we do have to acknowledge that this was done together with the My Money at Campus, which was co-organized by MoneySense and Association of Banks of Singapore and Citi Foundation-SMU Financial Literacy Program. So the students who came in this virtual conference or in this virtual carnival were the ones who are interested in coming in and learning more about financial literacy. So there might be some levels of bias in that, which might not be extended to the overall population. We need to bring more people onboarded, and that will be one way we can find out a more comprehensive measure. And finally, a question of food for thought: does these certain specializations and experiential learning help to build financial wellness and resilience? These are questions that I'm posing to you, and we will try to answer in the near future. So once again, thank you very much for that, and I will hand it back to Kyle again.